So, welcome to episode one. This is called Our Stories, Our Members. And joining us today is Dr. Martina Vasil from the University of Kentucky. We're excited to have her, and it's going to be an interesting talk for the next 30 minutes or so. And the first question I have for Dr. Vasil is, how did you get started with music?
Thanks for having me on here. I started with music when I was 7. My parents enrolled me and my sister in piano lessons. And for them, they immigrated here from the former Czechoslovakia and they didn't have many opportunities over there. So they always valued having their children get involved in music because they were never able to get formal training themselves. So they found a little old lady giving piano lessons for $3 an hour in her house. She was 83 years old and just wanted the company.
That's $3 an hour is not where we'd be at today. My first trumpet lessons were $4. That's how I remember because I used to have the $5 bill and then get $1 back at that point. So did you stay with piano then, or is that like your main instrument, or did you migrate into other spaces?
Yeah, I took piano lessons for 7 years. And then when I started fifth grade, got the hand-me-down clarinet from my two older sisters. And then somewhere around junior year of high school, I thought I want to be a music teacher because I'd started volunteering with the after school fifth grade band, and they called it Monster Band because they brought all the fifth graders from across the district. And I was sitting, with a little third grade or third row clarinets. And I also picked up violin that year because I thought if I'm a music major, I should learn more instruments and started taking violin lessons. But my main primary instrument in college was the B flat clarinet, music ed major, and then thought I wanted to go into ethnomusicology. Didn't make it into the degree program. Thought, well, I'll keep going with music ed. So then I went to Eastman, did my ORF levels, kept teaching K through 8, general music band, a little strings too, actually, and then came back for my doctorate. And I wanted to study with my mentor for my undergrad studies. That's kind of the entire
So,
musical
so two,
journey.
yeah. Two follow-up questions here. One, what was that? Did you have like a defining moment that you're like, I'm going to major in music? Was there something that like triggered that for you?
Yeah, it was that monster band. I loved helping those third clarinets. They were so clueless. I could really help them out with their fingerings. And I thought, gosh, I really love teaching. And I mean, I had almost gone into physics because I loved astronomy and I was like really into NASA and the planets. But I got some physics books from the library and I was like, oh my God, this is too much math. And I thought, what else do I really enjoy? And I loved music, so combine it, teaching and music. And that's when I was in high school. That's when I made the decision.
Yeah, it's interesting how our life mine's very similar in that I was going to be planning to be an engineer. And then you sort of imagine what your life is going to be in that space of like, oh, I'm just going to be sitting there doing math all the time in a cubicle or what have you. And then I was like, I kind of like music. Maybe I'll just major in music and do that. And now you sort of have evolved into you went from that monster band and teaching those young clarinet players and helping them with their fingerings, which they always need help with, right? B flat, B natural, that sort of thing. But they have that, you have that going on, and then you land for your graduate, and now you're at the University of Kentucky. And so, is this what you thought the journey would be like when you first got into teaching? Did you think like I'm just going to be a teacher and do that for 20, 30 years, or I'm just because some people do that, right? They get that teaching job and they're like, I'm just going to be here for 25 years doing this or 30 years. Was that your thought process when it went into undergrad? And
Well, actually, this is that immigrant mentality. I mean, we were told day one, all of you are getting your doctorates. End of story. School is your job. So I knew since forever that I was going to get a doctorate and even starting the music ed program as a bachelor's degree. I was like, I'm going to get a doctorate. And at the time, you get sucked into the culture. And I thought I was going to be like a clarinet studio professor. And I got really in depth with clarinet stuff. And then that all came to a screeching halt when I took my general music methods course. And it was so much fun. And I felt like I always tell my mentor that it's like my black and white world turned into color. Because for the first time, I was asked to make my own music, move, learn about different cultures. So getting the doctorate was always there, but the kind of doctorate shifted. So from, I guess, being DMA, then I thought, well, I want to do what Janet's doing, Janet Robbins, my mentor, and she was a music ed general methods professor. Um, and like I said, I did kind of tinker. I really liked world music. So I thought, well, maybe I'll get a master's in ethnomusicology and then go back. But I think I'm one of the rare people that kind of always knew what the end goal was, even though the path was a little twisty turvy, but pretty much I knew since I was 18, I was going to get that doctorate.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I'd like to say my path was that way as well, but it was very much like circumstantial into everything. Like I got to my undergrad, I was like, finished it, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to more school. And then I saw an advertisement up on the board to become an assistant at the University of Connecticut for like the marching band and that. And I was like, oh, why don't I do that? And then you just sort of like the snowball, but it's very interesting. I think our paths are similar in that my parents were always about education, right? Education, education, education. And so that was always drilled into it. But by the time I finished my undergrad, I was so sick of being in school for so long. And then I decided that, and then of course you start teaching and then you start taking more classes and you start doing all those kind of things. But at the University in Kentucky, what do you do right now?
So right now I'm an associate professor of music education and I'm the elementary specialist. So I have a undergrad course that focuses on K through 5 elementary music. And then I have a secondary general music methods course in the spring, and I turned that into modern band. We actually did the course name change. And I tell my students, this is like a 6 through 12 general music. What do you do? If you get a high school choir gig and then you've got 3 classes of music appreciation, let's make it active. And so they learn how to do modern band. And then I teach a graduate course in qualitative research. That's my expertise, that methodology. I'm on a course release now because I'm director of graduate studies. So I only teach those 3 classes in a year. And as director of graduate studies, I oversee about 120 graduate students, all sorts of advising and degree, form processing and things like that. I'm also director of summer music ed programming here at UK. So we do training in Orff, Dalcroze, and modern band. So I do all the programming and the hiring and budget contracts, things like that. And a part of that contract is I also teach kind of like Orff capstone courses throughout the year. Every fall and spring, if students are ready for it, if they've taken Orff level 2, they're eligible to do a capstone project with me. So I meet with them weekly and they do an Orff project in their classroom, write it up. And then I offer like an Orff workshop class where they can just attend workshops or the conference for credit. And they just report to me and write up summaries and reflections. So I'm a technically like a 2-2 course load with release now, but then I've got the sprinkling of optional Orff classes on top, which is bundled with my director of summer music ed stipend. So I kind of have 3 main roles here at UK.
So what's your least fun thing to do
Oh my
in
God,
your job?
emails, emails.
Emails? I was going to say emails, or as soon as you said administration and budget.
No, I enjoy organizing things and kind of cracking the code on how to run things. That I actually don't mind the administrative stuff. It's no one told me when you become a professor, they get like hundreds of emails a day, and just learning how to allocate the time and communicate to people the expectations that I cannot immediately respond. It's like a 2-day turnaround. That's what I tell my students. And once they know, it's totally
Yeah.
manageable and okay. But it took me a couple years to get into my rhythm.
Getting the multiple emails right before the assignments due. That
Right.
something came up, I can't do this, that sort of thing. I was thinking back to, and it's one of those things you can obviously when you're doing music ed and teacher prep, you can't cover everything. There's just so many things. And the one thing that I never thought would be would be such a time suck was the admin portion. Even as a high school band director, there was so much I felt like there was so much just admin and emails and budgets and like organization. And then you had the part where you're teaching, you know, and that almost becomes secondary sometimes. So that balance of skills become really important. But you do a ton of stuff, and that's obvious. But there's probably something you're really passionate about that you're working on the side that because I find most people do. They always have like a passion project that they're excited about. What's yours?
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, I just got a contract with Oxford University Press, and we are going to release next year Popular Music and Elementary Music Education. It's an edited book with 38 chapters, first of its kind, everything you can imagine about what do you do when you want to bring popular music to K through 5 education in the US. So we've got, I guess I'm kind of in a waiting mode right now because authors are writing their chapters. But once I hit the spring, it's going to be reviewing all the initial drafts and giving the feedback. So right now, I'm actually using my time to look into funding to help support me with the book. I'm the only editor. So finding funds to get someone to help me with like technical editing so I can focus on content, and then somebody to help me with the indexing in the book. It's due next October, so I gotta hustle. But I've been working on this idea for the past year. It took a whole year to get the proposal through, and you have to get like sample chapters ready, and you have to get initial abstracts from people. But I'm so excited because I've seen so many amazing teachers bring popular music with kids, but there's nothing written down about it really beyond like a random article. And I envision this being a real great resource for anybody. Like, I want to teach electric bass to a fourth grader. Where do I start? Or I want to do a cover song on classroom instruments like Jimmy Fallon. How do I get started? Or I want to bring hip hop into my classroom or video game music. So it's pretty comprehensive. I was a little surprised at it getting so long. The reviewers requested additional content that added 10 more chapters than I originally budgeted. So we're working through it. So that's my big project for this year, and I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so much work putting books together and editing and going through that. And but what you're doing, I think, is really important. And especially people in the popular music field, they often feel like they're the one-offs. I'm the only one that I know that's doing this. I don't have support. And then they can look to a resource like this and see like, oh, there are other people that are actually thinking the same way I do, but oftentimes it's not reflected. It's changed. The landscape has changed a lot in the US with popular music programs, especially compared with even 10 or 15 years ago and what's available. So I think these kind of resources become very important for everyone to sort of look back to and understand like they're not the unicorn in the classroom or the unicorn in the district that want to do this. And I'll have to clear out, there's probably like space, 38 chapters worth, maybe like right there, I think on the shelf. So talking about we're going to change gears a little bit here and talk about ISME and your first you've been a member for a while. I think it's like 2015 or something like that that
Mhm.
you've been a member. And so why did you even bother with joining ISME? Because the US we have so many, we have NAFME, the National Association for Music Education. We have the College Music Society. We have our local music education associations. Kentucky in general has a really strong music centric program. So why would you bother with joining ISME?
Yeah, I mean, it was recommendations by colleagues. Like, as soon as I started UK, they're like, "Oh, you got to submit to present at ISME." It's an incredible opportunity to meet people from other countries and see how music programs function around the world. And I've always had a love of travel and visiting new places. And so I started in 2015, and that's when I submitted. And the first one I went to was in Glasgow in Scotland, and it was really transformational and just so interesting to meet so many people from different institutions and seeing how they do it compared to the US. So it's I don't like being siloed or isolated. I think it's important to see what other people do across the globe.
Yeah, it's the ISME membership is over 80 countries right now, and we definitely have a lot of members from the United States. But just understanding that the how music's courses and programs work, and also how they're funded, and the techniques and philosophies that come into that is always really important to go into it. So, what's been your most memorable ISME experience?
Evelyn Glennie. I think that was the first year too. I had been watching her documentary and talking to her with my students. I was teaching the year prior to that conference, and I had been doing my dissertation, so I was teaching part-time at a charter school, and I was showing bits of the documentary of Evelyn Glennie to my students to show them, like, first of all, a female percussionist and somebody who is deaf and how she works with vibration. So then when I found out she was a keynote at ISME and then seeing her in person, it was just incredible. She's an outstanding musician, and I never get opportunities like that to see really famous people like that. So that was really impactful. Someone I had been admiring for years and sharing with my students, and then to finally see them in person at the conference. So that's probably one of my favorite memories, seeing Evelyn. And I got to go on stage. She asked for a dancer, and my hand shot up in the air, and
Of course,
she
yeah,
like made music to my movement. So I was like, oh, I was fangirling the whole time.
yeah, yeah. Even for Helsinki this year, it was just such an amazing the keynote, the opening ceremonies, all the students up there performing. It's those things that really sort of solidify your memories and your experience. And even when you're going back to your experience with that monster band, right? It's like that one thing can become that defining moment. And then what I find with ISME was interesting. I've talked to a lot of people about why they join ISME or looking at members and saying what's going on. And there's always this idea of like, well, I want that line on my CV, right? I want to put it on my CV and it looks good. And I think for many people, that sort of thought process stops there. But after you're in the music world for a while, you realize it seems really huge, right? It seems like there's all these people out there teaching music, but then you realize it's actually very small. It's a very small world, and you develop a lot of connections just through meeting people at conferences and talking with them and developing whether it's projects or just even that one-on-one experience about talking through research or just sharing, other moments with them. So is that what's led to that continued involvement? So you've been involved for, well, going on nine, excuse me, 9 years at this point. So why didn't you just say at the end of the 2 years, like, okay, I presented, I did my thing, I met an idol, and now I'm done, and I'm out, and I'll just go on to other things. Why did you renew at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I Ismi's journal is one of my favorite journals. Um, sometimes sometimes I find some of our journals quite hard to read. I always feel like the ISME journal, it's easy to understand research. I enjoy seeing perspectives from other countries on topics I'm interested in. So the journal is a draw for me. And then getting to see different parts of the country. I mean, I got to go to, Scotland. That was a first. And then we pivoted in 2018 to Azerbaijan, which I hadn't even heard of that country before. And that was my first time going to the Middle East and experiencing that culture. The cultural education is invaluable. And I'm grateful for ISME because, I mean, before I got into higher ed, I could never afford trips like this. Now not only like learning from other people, but getting to submit my work and getting financial help from my college, I'm able to see these countries that I'd never have access to before. So ISME is almost like the hand reaching out to help open these opportunities for me to see the world and get culturally educated and share some of my work. And then this year in Finland, I mean, I have to say that was a second favorite memory. You mentioned the kids, seeing those children wholeheartedly singing, shouting, whooping, dancing, playing music by ear. I sent all these videos to my string colleagues. I'm like, this is what we need. It was so it made my heart warm. I was in tears the whole time. It was so beautiful, and learning about their education system. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's threefold. So the journal, continuing cultural understanding, and then getting to meet other people.
Yeah, and I think a couple of responses to this, and it's just being a high school band director in the U.S. has a very specific connotation and denotation to it, right? It has a really specific meaning, and I think generally what ends up happening, from my experience, is that you get entrenched sort of in that culture. The people that you interact with at festivals or conferences are the band directors. They're doing very similar things to what you're doing, and it almost adds to this like competition level, of who's doing the same old thing better. And this idea of experiencing other platforms and other programs that are outside of that is very impactful to understanding like how students are interacting with music, and how they're teaching and how they're performing, and what does the relationship look like between the instructor and the students, and how that's going back and forth. It opened my eyes for sure, even being in music for so long and just learning all the different pieces that come into play and how different countries view music and that interaction. And the second thing I would echo is just traveling, right? It's easy, I think, to get a very uh, inward focus on what we're doing based on the area that we're in. And one of the things that was shocking to me is that the U.S. and some other countries have long developed music education teacher programs, right? They've been around for what, probably almost 100 years now at this point. And there are many countries that still either don't have programs or they're just in the beginning of starting those programs. So there's so much knowledge that can be spread from both sides, both people that are attending from areas of the world that are still developing, and also people that have more established programs that they can look at and go back and forth. Um, so I think that's always important, and just interacting with the colleagues that are in different spaces. It's always, I don't get to do tons of that because I get caught up in everything, but it's really interesting to see the excitement that people have around not only ISME in itself, but also just about what they're doing and the passion. And if you've been to other conferences, it's not the same way, right? It's not the same way. I think music educators or music people are unique in that way, about just demonstrating that passion that they have for what they do for the students, for each other, is always very impactful from my side of it. So the last question that I have for you is, it's always hard to give advice, right? Because your pathway is your pathway and your journey, but there's certain things you sort of learn along the way, right? So what advice would you have for people that are looking to get into like teaching or academia, or like if you could do something over again, or you could give that one or two sort of bits of advice that this is what I wish I would have known.
Yeah, I guess one of the first things to think about is finances. You don't know what you don't know. And my parents never went to college. And even though I was the third child to go through, I just wish I would have looked high and low for like master's degree assistantships. Like I knew for the doctorate that that should get covered. But I spent so much money on my master's and just finished paying those loans off like a couple years ago, and I'm 41 now. And that weight of those loans on me, and you don't make a lot of money when you start teaching. So any possible way you can, apply to as many schools as possible to try to get the scholarship, go to a state school that's cheaper. I mean, I did that for undergrad. I actually went out of state to a state school because in Pittsburgh, the private school I applied to was so expensive, even with scholarships, it was still cheaper to go out of state. Um, so keep an eye on that and really think about um, at the time the mentality was, well, education's my job and I can just take out student loans, and didn't think about it at all. So I do see my students here seem to be much more cognizant of it, and higher ed has gotten much more expensive. So just being aware of your finances, which continue to follow me into my PhD program, because even though you're on assistantship, you're maybe making, I think I was making maybe 10K a year. Here we offer 14K, and I still had to take student loans out. Like I didn't know that it was expected to go to conferences, which is travel costs, hotel costs, registration costs. Like I didn't have the money. I had to take more loans out even with a TA. So I think a lot of students don't understand the cost of graduate education, especially if you're a first generation college student. So that's the one huge thing I wish I could redo. Um, the second bit of advice is I think it's really important to stay true to yourself. It can be really easy to play the comparison game. And it wasn't clear to me like exactly where I'd end up. Like nobody knows, but I know for sure I followed my heart and my passions, which took me from clarinet to like, oh my gosh, I love kids, to oh my gosh, what's this ORF training? to I also love world music. I also love pop music. And it did take about like 10 years for clear research agenda to come out. And I ended up with a very unique niche, I guess, or in pop music. And it happened organically. Like this wasn't pre-planned. I wasn't looking for like, I don't know what has no one else done. I'm passionate about both of these things. And it just so happened no one else was really doing it, that blend. Um, and I was never comparing myself. Like I don't beat myself up for not having the top JRME articles. I really don't care about that. Like you got to know your core values. And that might be important for somebody else, and that's fine, but not to play the comparison game, and you just be the best that you can be. And you'll find a pathway to success. I strongly believe that. Like it'll happen the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think going to your first point, I think that's, as academia, as higher ed costs have increased exponentially in the United States, many times a public school teacher is making more than a university professor, especially if you leave it, say 8 to 10 years in your public school teaching career, and then you decide to become, at the beginning, the new professor, and then many times it's actually quite a pay drop to be able to even feel like, I think there's sometimes this feeling of like, oh, we're going to get to the quote unquote ivory tower, as much as I hate that term, but it's going to be sitting on top. And then you realize, wait a minute, it's not what I thought it was going to be, or it's a surprise, I think, to many people. I think there's an understanding there's going to be a pay decrease. I don't think they understand the extent of what it is. And one of the things I think that's also difficult, and maybe it's echoed in other countries, I don't know, is the pay discrepancies that occur between somebody, say, in education or music education compared to other sciences. If you're going to go into, if you would have went into that physics, like you mentioned, or some sort of research science, that a lot of times the pay and what you're equating, even though you spent all this money to get your doctorate and your master's degrees, and then the pay doesn't equate on the other side to come out of that. The second thing is your passion. I think it's, it's endearing. You sort of just took these opportunities, and then when you had that chance, you combine them. And what I found in the arts many times, at least through my lens, has been that people don't want to combine things, and they want to stay like, this is it. We shouldn't add this other influence in. Let's stay true to this form, even though that's not what really happens many times in the music world. Even if you take the pop world, there's so many different influences that are coming into the music that are just naturally brought in, and the artists don't think anything about incorporating that. Sometimes through academia, through education, we try to like separate them out and put their own little nice boxes of music, and this is this and this is that, and we go forward. So, kudos to you for being able to sort of combine those things that that you're passionate about. And I think we all find that particular journey at some point. And the comparison, my third point, I guess my last one would be, the comparison point is real. Like I hear that a lot, and how they, oh, I see what this person's doing, and like I'm not writing as much. And I agree with you. I think there's so much stress, especially with social media out there, when people see these successes, but we all don't have the same experience. We don't all have the same passion. We don't all have the same maybe time or support. Or you could have somebody that's in academia that's has a very high admin workload, and a 4-4 where they're teaching 4 courses per, and like, how do you find that time to write? I mean, it becomes very difficult to still maintain those other things. So it's important, like not all circumstances are the same as we go through. But do you have anything else that you want to say before we leave? I know you have that one project that you work on in, I want to say, Liberia, but I might be getting the country wrong. I don't know if
You
you want
got
to
it
leave us with that.
right. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah, I
okay.
can finish talking about that. Yeah. Oh, this is a long journey with this music school. 2017, I had a student pop by my office. They were directed to me because they wanted to start a music curriculum in their school. They'd always already been doing like piano lessons, but they were getting a master's in community development. So I met Samson Tarpe, started talking to him, and he told me about his school in Liberia. It's the only music school in Liberia, and the Agape National Academy of Music. And he needed help with the early childhood curriculum because they knew how to, reading notation, piano. They do a lot of music for the church. They didn't know what to do with the little kids. So we worked on that together for a semester. He graduated, went back to Liberia, and we kept in communication. And he kept saying like, he really wanted me to come visit to train the teachers because they don't have any training like that in Liberia. So I got a grant through the college and spent 5 days in Liberia at the school, and brought as many resources as I could, took the teachers through activities. And then 2 years later, COVID happens, the school's struggling. So I've done a bunch of fundraisers for them to, keep the doors open to pay the teachers. But then in 2023, I got a Fulbright that allowed me to stay longer. So I stayed for 2 weeks last August. And that was really great because we could spread out the teacher training over more days. I did workshops with the children that the teachers could watch. They could see the pedagogies in practice. And I got to work, K through 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and even the high schoolers. We did some modern band. I tried. So it's the school's in great need. It's Liberia has been ravaged over the years. Not only was it the only United States colony, that's where they, let's send them back to Africa, they said, without caring about anyone's specific
Mhm.
culture or what country they actually came from. That's why Liberia is named Liberia, the liberated people. Even the main city is called Monrovia after James Monroe.
Mhm.
So it's actually, they speak English there. They use American currency. They do have a Liberian dollar, but it's extremely watered down. And they like American culture. It was really surprising to me. And when I tried to find like Liberian folk songs and things like that, they said, "Oh, we don't have these anymore. The records have been destroyed, or there were 16 original tribes, and this is like the impact of colonialism is it just completely wiped out
Right.
the cultures of 16 tribes, and now they're kind of like a mini America." It was really strange, but they had several civil wars, Ebola crisis, COVID. So even the music school doesn't have running electricity or water, and we had to run on the generator. So all the costs for running the school, for getting the gasoline to run it, for getting hotspots for when they need Wi-Fi. So I'm always continuously trying to help with fundraising, get money sent over there. And my role in training the teachers, I'm trying to get 2 teachers to come here to get their ORF training, which in talking with you, understanding that there's some grants through ISME, I'm hoping that that may be a pathway to support them. Say they really struggle financially.
Well, if you have any ongoing fundraisers or any links you can share, I'll be happy to get that out to social media. But it's it shows what an impact one person can make, I think, which is really awesome, and sometimes it's all it takes is one or two individuals to have a caring and interest and spread the message and understanding, and also look at it through the lens of like what we have here in the US, even in the hardest hit areas compared to what other countries have and their resources. It would shock most people, but thank you for joining us today. We really enjoyed having you on this first episode of Our Stories, Our Members, and hopefully there'll be an episode two, but we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Sounds
Thank you.
great. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
Dr.
me.
Vasil, for joining us for today.
Thank you.